So, a warm welcome to the third and final podcast of the Panacea project. My name is Dudley Curtis from the European Transport Safety Council, and my guest today is Dr. Anna Dahlman from the Swedish National Road and Transport Research Institute, which is known as VTI. Anna, thanks for joining us today. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing very well.
Great. So, I'm just going to start with a reminder of what the Panacea project is all about. So, it's an EU-funded research project looking at how to use the latest technology to help professional drivers with their fitness to drive. So that means managing things like fatigue, stress, alcohol consumption, drugs, all things that can harm road safety if they're not managed properly. So Anna, could you start by telling us a bit about your work as a researcher and what your role has been on the Panacea project?
Thank you. So as you already mentioned, I work at VTI, one of the partners in the project, and my role there is to work with research concerning human factors in transport. So a lot of traffic safety work and a lot of focus on the drivers and the possibilities for them to perform their job as professional drivers in a good way, but also some other transport and traffic safety related research. And in the Panacea project, my role has mainly been to plan and lead the work on the final evaluation of the Panacea system. So the Panacea system in use with actual professional drivers. And that work has been structured in different activities. We started with defining our use cases for the project, and then based on that, formulating research questions, and then developing a framework for this whole evaluation so that we could do a thorough investigation at different sites for the project, and then evaluate what do the users think of the Panacea system, and not only professional drivers, but also their managers or operators, to see what were the potential benefits of using such a system.
Okay, great. So, well, in a little while, we'll talk a bit more about how the users got on with it and the managers and so on. So, you were responsible for analyzing the results also of the pilot sites on this project and drawing some conclusions. So, can you remind us what we were testing and where and in what kinds of situations?
So we had three different use cases in the Panacea project. They were located in different countries. So the first one, use case A, was in Sweden. And there we focused on a new type of professional driver, which is shuttle safety drivers. So automated shuttles are running in a town called Linköping in Sweden. And the professional drivers who supervise the operation of these shuttles were the main focus in this use case. So they normally drive city buses or trams, but during this project period, they also had the task to be in these self-driving shuttles and make sure that the operation was safe and also take care of the passengers. So the Panacea project focus for them was to make sure they were alert and able to perform these different tasks at the same time. So this use case, we evaluated the Panacea system during regular operations, so they were doing their normal job and trying out our fitness to drive system. The second use case B, was in Greece, where we had taxi drivers and delivery riders as our target population. So two different types of professional drivers. And also in this use case, we had a slightly different approach. So they were not using it in their normal everyday operation. We had a more of an experimental design. So we also manipulated alcohol intake, which was one of the driver impairment in focus, and also fatigue, so that we could really test some of the technologies in the Panacea system.
So can you
And the
say a bit
third,
more about that? You said it was an experimental setup. So what does that look like for people who don't know?
yes. So in the Greek, in use case being Greece, we had tests done in simulators. So where you can both a riding simulator, a motorcycle simulator, and a driving simulator with a car. Since it's quite dangerous to let people drink alcohol and drive out in real traffic. So that's why we used simulators for this use case. And we also had a circuit around an enclosed area where they could drive. So we could have them drink alcohol and be tired and still do measurements in a safe way, just to see if our Panacea technologies could detect alcohol incapacitation and fatigue. In this use case, we also did some tests with the technology that detects drugs, not during driving, but still just to see that the technology works.
And how does it detect drugs? What technology was used?
For drug detection, we use saliva samples and then an on-site technology to analyze the saliva, so we could see different types of drugs.
Okay. And I think there was a third use case as well.
So use case C was done in Spain. There we focused on bus drivers, and these bus drivers did a slightly longer trip, so they were medium and long distance driving, so coach buses. And in Spain, we tested a slightly limited version of the Panacea system. So the focus was mostly on fatigue detection during driving in this use case.
Okay. Well, very important for coach drivers because they're driving long distances, aren't they?
Yes, definitely.
So Panacea system uses a whole variety of sensors, and there were some new sensors used on this project, and then specially developed software in the back end, which kind of tracks drivers' overall fitness to drive. So what kind of things did you learn from these pilot testing scenarios from a sort of technical perspective?
As you mentioned, we had several different sensors in the Panacea system. Some of them were consumer products, and some of them were more research grade equipment that was newly developed. So one of the main challenges was, of course, integration of this into one put together product with both the interface towards drivers, but also an interface towards operators and managers. Um, so there were lots of technical challenges, but also when it comes to the user perspective, it was challenging to have a seamless integration of all these different types of technologies for the drivers so that it would be easy for them to use all the different sensors and like have them in a natural way integrated into their everyday operation. As and we faced some technical difficulties with some of the sensors. I mentioned that use case A had this new type of vehicle, the self-driving shuttles, and integrating driver monitoring systems inside these vehicles was very challenging because the drivers don't have a fixed sitting position as you would in a bus or a car. They are free to move around. So tracking the driver in such a vehicle was very challenging. That was one of the technical challenges. And with some of the sensors, we also had some, um, technical issues due to them being relatively newly developed and so on. So it was very helpful to try them out in the real world to see what are the potential hurdles we need to go over to be able to have these holistic fitness to drive systems in the
Yeah,
real life.
sure. And so with all these sensors and, drivers potentially feeling a bit fatigued, or they might have, some alcohol left in their system from the night before if they, went out after work or whatever. How does the Panacea system kind of decide whether or not a driver is fit to drive?
So Panacea system is based on both detection of driver impairment, but also on a countermeasure system providing guidance and countermeasures to sort of deal with the problems also. So what the driver does is um, we have several different detection systems for different types of impairments. So it would be fatigue, stress, alcohol, drugs, and distraction. And then there's an algorithm within the Panacea system that evaluates the results of all sensors and makes a decision whether this driver is fit to drive or not. And then, depending on the decision, you would either say everything is okay, you can go ahead and go to your vehicle and proceed with your day, or you would get a recommendation of if it's a severe impairment, you would get a recommendation to switch drivers and say that it's not a good idea for you to drive today. And that would also be sent to the managers or operators. But these would be the two extremes. And most of the time, of course, the drivers were fit to drive. But if the system detects, for instance, that during a specific work shift, the driver had some fatigue episodes or slightly increased fatigue levels, the Panacea system would provide more tactical or long-term countermeasures. So these could be more in terms of advice for future shifts. So we detected that you were slightly fatigued today. Perhaps you should make sure that you get enough sleep, do some relaxation exercises or something like that to prepare for your next shift so that your fitness to drive would be better the next time you come to work. And these are also for the managers so that they are informed if their drivers have any types of impairments, and then you can work together and find a solution to improve fitness to drive over time.
Mm. Great. So the focus, of course, is human beings and professional drivers, and making sure that they're fit to drive when they get behind the wheel, or indeed, in this case, when they're supervising an automated vehicle. How did the drivers themselves get on with using this system with, you know, using all these different sensors and having various things measured, and how did they kind of respond to the experience?
So the driver response was quite different between drivers. Some of them found it very useful and were very positive towards the system and thought um, it's very useful to know your state, and also that they found the countermeasures and the more strategic or tactical countermeasures helpful to make sure that they could prepare themselves, and they um, felt good about being informed. Whereas other drivers thought, maybe not very useful. I think I can manage myself. I know when I'm tired, I don't need a system to tell me that I'm tired. Um, some drivers were also quite reluctant to perform additional tasks. I mean, some of these measurements would take some extra time to do. If you need to do a drug test, that would require some extra time. And some of the stress measurements and stress countermeasures were also something that would require you to allocate some time from your rest breaks, which not all drivers found, useful. So a lesson learned from that is that these types of measurements should be quick and easy to use and seamlessly integrated into other systems so that you don't have to allocate too much time to do each and every measurement or assessment.
Sure.
But as I mentioned, some drivers were very positive and thought it was helpful, and would very much want to use it in the future if a system like this would be publicly available.
Hmm. Was there sort of specific information that lots of drivers, the ones that were positive, that a lot of them like to have? Were there specific things like, were they interested in the fatigue or the alcohol testing, or what were the things that they found helpful, do you think?
Um, that was also a bit different between drivers. And I think many of the professional drivers already have alcohol interlocks in their vehicles, at least it differs a bit between countries, but some of them are quite used to that. So that was nothing new to them. And also random drug tests is something that you might see in some countries in professional drivers. But so the things that were new to many of the participants were the fatigue and stress assessments. And I think several of the drivers thought that it was very helpful to know if how was your sleep last night? Are you at high risk of being fatigued during this shift, for instance, or if a fatigue episode is detected, so that you can take action, perhaps have a cup of coffee, take a rest break, so that you could manage impairment in a better way. Yeah.
And looking at all of the results from these different test scenarios that you've looked at, was there anything that kind of really surprised you that you hadn't expected to see?
Mm. I think some of these differences between driver groups was quite surprising to me. And especially the attitudes towards being monitored was very different between driver groups in this project. And that was a bit surprising for me. I didn't mention that so much before, but the fact that you are being monitored and that personal data is collected and potentially shared with your managers
Mm.
is sensitive, of course, to professional drivers. And the attitude towards sharing your data with your employer and also in general, just being monitored differed a lot, not only between countries, but also between driver types of drivers within a country. Um, but a very striking difference was between Sweden and Spain, where the drivers and operators in Sweden were very open to this type of monitoring, whereas in Spain we had a lot of skepticism and resistance towards sharing personal data and being monitored, both from the drivers and driver unions.
Right. And
So.
did you see a sort of difference between the beginning of the project and as the project went on? Was there a sort of initial resistance among drivers, but then once they got used to the testing that they kind of became, or once they saw the benefits of it, they became more positive towards it? Did that occur?
We in some of the sites we didn't do a very long-term data collection. I mean, this didn't go on for years and years,
No,
so we
sure.
didn't see the long-term effects. But
Mhm.
yes, I think in some cases when you get assured that this data will not be shared with anyone that shouldn't see it, and your information is safe. We will not use it for anything, any bad purposes. Your employment is not at risk. This is only to help you. When we get that message through to the drivers that it's the main purpose is to help them, then they get more positive towards these monitoring systems. So I think it's definitely possible to change the point of view. With more information and also trying out the solution itself.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So overall, what do you think have been the most useful elements of the Panacea project for the future development of this type of fitness to drive system? It's been, I think, quite ambitious. We've been looking at a whole load of different things that affect fitness to drive, lots of sensors. We've had a cloud system. We've integrated with different types of drivers in
Mhm.
different countries. What do you think are the kind of key lessons learned for future work in this area?
Mhm. I think that the holistic approach that we had in the Panacea project is very beneficial and something we should definitely continue working with. And I think that is also one of the main novelties with the Panacea solution, that it integrates both impairment detection, but also, very importantly, the countermeasures and what to do with it when you detect something. Also, the fact that you involve both the driver and the managers and operators is important. So the key message I would say for future development of fitness to drive systems is that you should include not only detection, you should work with different types of countermeasures also on these different levels, the immediate countermeasures when you detect an impairment, but also the more long-term countermeasures to make sure that you have good driver health and fitness to drive over time, and hopefully also improve that over time. So these combined countermeasures that involved both the driver and the operator, I think are the most beneficial in the long term. So that's something I think we should really continue to develop. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Anna. It's been great to hear your perspective on this work. And I think, this project's generated a lot of insights into how technology can help professional drivers stay safe on the roads. And we've learned a lot about the challenges of integrating systems like Panacea into the everyday work of lorry and bus drivers. So that's it for today's podcast. Thank you so much to our guest, Anna Dahlman. If you'd like to find out more about the project, search for Panacea Fitness to Drive. And thanks for watching.